Hey folks, Chamia here with the Just Chamia Show with Miss Cutie Pie, Natasha Harden of Halmoni. So let's talk Halmoni. Okay, what is Halmoni?
Halmoni is your fashion safe space. It's a place where you can try things that you've never tried before and not feel like you're going to be judged or laughed at. And I think Halmoni is also, I'm body positive. I'm a body positive boutique. And so even if something doesn't fit, we're not going to shame you. And I don't affirm people who shame in shop. Mm-hmm. I always want to affirm. And so that's what we do here. I make people look fabulous.
All right. And you said if something doesn't fit, but I just want to clarify that you have things for people of all sizes.
Yeah, because just because it says a size small doesn't mean it's not going to fit all of this. Mm-hmm. The fabric might stretch in a way that the manufacturer and the designer who made it maybe didn't think about these bodies, but we know how to make clothes fit. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah.
Okay. Well, there it is. And just so you know, she doesn't just have size small, y'all. She has size all. And me and my size 18-20 have found some fabulosity in here and went crazy a little bit. But yes, she has things for everybody.
Fat girls have always looked fabulous. Maybe, you know, Magnin and Saks Fifth Avenue didn't think that we wanted to look beautiful and sexy, mm-hmm. but someone out there did and made their own dresses. And that's a lot of the things that I'm out there looking for sure.
For those who don't know, what is vintage and what is thrift? Are they the same? Are they different?
They're very different.
Okay, can you explain that?
They're different. If you're thrifting, stop using the hashtag vintage. It is wrong.
Okay.
Thrifting is like going on a scavenger hunt. Okay. You go into this warehouse type building and there's racks and racks of things, but they're not vintage because vintage technically is anything that's 20 years old. So 1995 and earlier is vintage right now. There's a lot of people in the vintage industry that don't consider anything in the 80s and 90s vintage. Okay. But I disagree because I'm an 80s and 90s baby, but I think that the 90s were definitely the last decade that made a fashion statement. Mm-hmm. So that's why I consider 90s vintage. And so when you go into a thrift store, you're going to find things that are vintage, but you're also going to find H&M stuff, American Apparel stuff, like stuff that your auntie made for you, things that you made in arts and crafts class. Mm-hmm. You can find anything in a thrift store. And I would say that a thrift store is just a place where you can find vintage. It's not a place that vintage always lives.
Okay. And so to clarify, vintage means 20 years or older, but just because it's old doesn't make it vintage?
20 years old and older, up to 100 years is vintage. Okay. Anything after 100 years is an antique.
Okay. Okay.
And because it's old, over 20 years old, it does make it vintage.
Okay. Okay. All right.
But old meaning like, oh, I bought this American Apparel t-shirt last year and it has pills all over it and I got grease on it and that's old, that's different.
Okay. That's just old and worn out.
That's just like dry and worn up. That's not old.
Okay. All right. So what are you? You've defined it now, that the difference between vintage and thrift and old and worn and used up and just gonna let it go, boo. To you and your experience in this vintage space, what have been some of the biggest misperceptions that people have had either in understanding vintage or in even shopping here?
They think that these are all of my clothes.
Okay.
They think that they're all of my grandmother's clothes. Mm-hmm. They think that I'm a thrift store. And another thing about thrift stores too is that they're dirty and that it's not, I think the perfect way to think about a vintage shop versus a thrift store is the word curate. Okay. A vintage shop is something that's curated. So the person is going out maybe thrifting.
Okay.
And sourcing vintage and then curating either the way that they see fashion, or it could be a decade that they're curating, like maybe just 60s or maybe just 80s, or maybe just like, oh, I want to just do vintage gowns, or oh, I want to do vintage ready-wear, or something like that.
Okay, so you actually curate, y'all. Actually going out, finding, sourcing, acquiring things to bring in to your shop. Like you went at a museum, you only bring
cleaning, steaming, not just like dirty.
I think that's important too, because when a lot of people think, I mean, no shade and being real about it, when people are thinking about vintage, they're thinking, oh, dusty, somebody's used it, slept in it, wore it, you know. It's not that.
It's not that.
Okay.
Because there's also another thing that I always tell people too, which is called dead stock. It's something that's vintage, but it still has its original tags on it. So that's never been worn.
Right.
Or I think that a lot of people think like, oh, somebody wore an apparel t-shirt you put on, honey. Somebody wore that too before you put it on. So that means it's pre-worn. It's kind of the same thing.
And I'm asking you I'm asking you sincerely to educate people, because they don't know.
And
I don't
think
have
that
all the
that's
answers.
it. I think that a lot of people don't know, and so they walk in automatically and say like, "Oh, I love your thrift store," and I'm like, you're probably a beginner on thrifting, so let me just tell you.
Yeah.
But not be pretentious about it.
Okay. One of the other things, a word that's out there a lot in the fashion industry right now, is couture. What's the difference between couture and vintage?
Things can be couture vintage.
Okay.
Couture just means, basically the way that I think of couture is like, you are really, really rich, and you have all these people who are waiting on you, and so you have your own set of people who are literally making the garment on you.
Okay.
And it has all these little special details, like couture is most of the time handmade. The way it has like beading and sequin on it, all of that is handmade, and it's just basically like very rich and very like bourgeois. But couture can be vintage.
Couture can be vintage, but couture can also be new. It could be new couture, right?
New couture, you know, it's my own personal opinion, but I think that just like how people are throwing around or throwing this hashtag vintage in the outfit that they're curating for themselves, I think that folks are also using the word couture for maybe their fashion brand or their fashion label, and it's not quite couture. It's probably mass manufactured, but they want to use the word couture because it has this feeling of being lavish and rich.
Okay. Growing up in a big country family, we had a lot of hand-me-downs, and it was a thing of pride. It's like, okay, that's gonna be mine one day. I can't wait to get in those shoes, that purse, that, this, that. Do you know anything about the hand-me-down culture?
Yeah, I'm a big sister. Most of my things were hand-me-down.
Okay, so when people think about vintage, and I know right now people are just, thrift or vintage or whatever. Do you think we need to kind of revive the hand-me-down culture? I mean, you think about how much things that we waste, or things that people think they give to Goodwill or a Salvation Army versus to a rescue mission or a homeless shelter, things like that. Are hand-me-downs okay?
I think hand-me-downs are absolutely okay, but I also know where I come from, and I didn't come from like a lavish, rich family, and so hand-me-downs was just part of my life, and so I don't know what it's like for someone who didn't grow up in that way, who got everything new, who got everything they wanted, who never really had to do anything, reuse or upcycle or do anything like that. And so I think that it's a movement we can completely bring back, and I think that it's definitely happening because of sustainability and everything being green. Because I think that there is a stigma around wearing things or having things that belonged to somebody else. I think that in certain cultures, I can completely get on board with that. It has somebody else's energy or somebody else's soul, and you don't want to like mess with that. I can completely respect and get that.
Right.
But I think that me personally, why I think people have hang-ups about it is that it was on somebody else, and that, oh, if I wear pants, then my stuff is on somebody else's stuff. Not if you wash it. Like, you spilled a whole can of Chef Boyardee on yourself, or oh, you did like a Tough Mudder and you like fell in the mud. You washed it.
Even before there were machines, they took it to the river on a rock and
you don't want to wash it yourself. There's wash and fold. You don't want to use Tide. There's Oxy that lifts the dirt away. There's
wash
Clorox.
That thing and wear it.
Clorox for colors, not just for whites anymore, people. Like, come on.
You're afraid of the chemicals. There's the Honest brand.
I don't want to wear that. Somebody else wore that. Boo, honey, wash it.
Yeah, and put it on and be fabulous.
Yeah.
Okay, let me ask you this. In your vintage shop in Halmoni, why do you carry things for people of all sizes? That isn't, and again, we've seen there's plenty of designers out there of all sizes that design for the size 0 to size 7, 8. You know, so I appreciate that, but everybody doesn't. So why do you?
I do it because I'm fat and I want to look cute, and I know that if I think that, there's obviously a whole bunch of women out there who feel the same way as I do. And growing up, thrifting and vintage together, because they're separate things, was something that brought me joy, and it was something that helped me to find myself and to find what my fashion aesthetic was and what I liked wearing. And so I carry lots of sizes because I don't want to fit the woman who has access to the whole world, 0 to 12, 0 to 14. I want to not only provide that, because that's a bulk of what I find is definitely smaller sizes, but just like I said earlier, depending on the fabric, and thank God for polyester vintage, even though it makes us sweat, we can put some layers on and absorb all that stuff. It stretches, and we can wear it and look fucking good wearing it.
Right. She's so cute. She is so cute. One of the things that you said a couple of times, Natasha, because I'm fat. And fat is a bad word to a lot of people.
To a lot of people, I'm sorry you feel that way.
In this American society, we've made fat a bad word. And you say it matter of factly, like, and boo, I'm fat. That's beautiful. It's gorgeous. How did you get to that place within yourself where you say, I'm fat, I'm not plus, are you plus size, are you curvy, are you pleasantly plump, whatever. You own fat.
I own fat, and I like to compare it to the word queer.
Okay.
Because I think that queer for a really long time was thought of as a bad word. It was like you were either gay, lesbian, bisexual, and I think that when you said that you were queer, people said, well, you know that that's a bad word, because I think that a long time ago when you said that somebody was queer, it was that something was not right about them. That something funny business was going on. And I think that the queer community has taken that word and has made it something for themselves. And I think that the way that came about was that queerness was like this subculture of like gayness.
Okay.
And I think that not everybody's gonna use the word fat because it's a radical word. You're trying to change the meaning of it. And so I think that some people like to use the word curvy, and they like to use the word plus size, but I think that those are safe words. Like, I'm fat. The stuff on my body that makes my body look different than yours, that's fat. And I'm fat and I'm fabulous. And so I use
this
the
isn't
word
plus size under my skin, you know.
Exactly. This is not curvy hair.
Right.
And so I think that I use the word fat because I like to think of that I'm in this subculture of body positivity, and that I'm in this subculture of like radical body positivity.
Okay. And that translates in a lot of ways, certainly into the beautiful items that we see here in Halmoni, but also there's some community work that you do. Can you talk a little bit about a Naked Lady Soiree and some of the other things that you do?
So Naked Lady Soiree is my body positive clothing swap that I host here in my shop, and I started that when I first opened the business for a lot of different reasons. Definitely to build community, definitely to like have a place and a space where I could like meet people, but because I have social anxiety, which you might not think of,
I would have never known.
That was a way for me to like create my own safe space and to do the things that I wanted to do, but in a like controlled environment. It was a way for me to get rid of old inventory that might have been in shop for too long. But more than anything, I think, when I was in high school, clothing swaps, I think, were something that happened among friends in like not a clothing swap way. I don't think that we call it a clothing swap. It's just like,
let me wear that shirt.
Let me get that. And it was like, in your clique of homegirls or whatever, that's just like, it was like the traveling pants of the sisterhood or something.
Right.
And I can't say that I ever really had that growing up, except for with my sister, because we were, the same size for a really long time. And so I think that it made me think about that, because there's clothing swaps that happen all the time, but I can't participate in them because the pants, the shirts, the tank tops might only go all up on my thigh.
Right.
One thigh.
Yeah. Right.
So I wanted to say body positive because I wanted all different size women to come. But I also, in the clothing swap space, if somebody tried something on, I didn't want anybody to go, girl, like, ooh, don't wear that, that don't look good, or oh, that makes this come out, or this, or does this. And so those are one of the rules that I have during the clothing swap, is that it's only affirmations.
Okay.
We're only affirming people. And it's not that we're gonna send you out on the street looking crazy, but who's to say that you can say what looks good on me? Because in your mind, you might be the type of person who rocks the visible belly outline, who doesn't wear supportive garments, who doesn't rock girdles all the time, sucking everything in. You might be the type of fat person or body positive, plus size curvy person who's completely down with your body and all of the lumps and bumps. And so if somebody tries a dress on, the person who says might be a person who says, oh, you should wear like shapewear underneath that. So I think that it's just to enjoy the moment, the community, and the fashion, and to let that be what you want it to be, and not let other people's opinions and little voices come into a place that's supposed to be bringing you joy, or an event that's supposed to bring you joy.
With all of the advertisements that we see on TV and magazines, etc., there's plenty of things that show us what beauty is supposed to look like. How do you define beautiful?
I think that I've been thinking about that a lot lately, and what made me think about it was an article that I came across on social media, and it was basically called like, where are all the ugly people? And I think that there's beauty in ugliness.
Right.
Like, we don't always have to be polished. Everything doesn't have to be IKEA, Sunset Magazine. Like, there's beauty in rough around the edges. There's beauty in hair where it's not supposed to be growing. There's beauty in moles and things that I think our society calls ugly because it's not perfect. And so for me, I think that beauty is everything.
I love that. I love that.
That's so beautiful. It's so corny, but it just came out because that's what was supposed to come out. It's everything. Yeah.
Well, that's really you, and I appreciate that. So, how can people find out more about fabulous Natasha from the Boogie Down and Halmoni?
You can come visit me here in the shop and absorb all of this.
And here is
1601 2nd Avenue in Oakland, 1 block off the lake between East 16th and Foothill Boulevard. You can find us on Instagram, Twitter, Pinterest, Facebook under Halmoni Vintage. And if you forget all of that, just use Google.
All right. And one other thing too. So someone comes in and they're like, oh my gosh, overwhelmed. Where do I start? One of the things I read too is you help people with styling.
Yeah, so I think it's important to say if you don't really feel comfortable, but most of the time I can see it. And usually when people come in, I just say hello, how are you doing, how's your day, because it is a small shop, we are in a community, so I'm going to talk to you. This is not Macy's.
Right.
And I kind of let people touch and pick, because I'm kind of watching you a little bit, because I want to see what your aesthetic is and what you're drawn to, because I think right away when people come in, the first thing that they touch isn't always the first thing that they put in the dressing room. And I always grab that and put it in there, because I say you were obviously drawn to that, so let's just try it on and play with it.
Okay.
So I think that when you come in, just come in and know that we're gonna have a good time.
There it is. Natasha at Halmoni. Thank you so much, girlfriend.
Thank you so much.